Well, so nice to see you. I was just telling everybody that we are helping launch your debut novel today, which is The Woman Before Wallis.
Yes.
And so hold up your copy too. Yay. This is your foray into fiction, and it's a remarkable historical novel in the sense that it has so much research that went into this. And you know, you can tell on every page there is a lot of research that you did about the royals. So Bryn, let me just introduce you to our audience today. It's 3 o'clock now. So Bryn has a Master's of Letters in Creative Writing from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland.
Yep, that's correct.
And a bachelor's degree in English Literature from McGill in Toronto. And you live in Toronto, you are Canadian, and you write books that want to drive readers to transport them to different eras, different worlds, just like I do. So in the pandemic, I think that that is such a wonderful thing to be able to do because, you know, in the pandemic, we have all the time in the world to read.
Well, yeah, we do. I mean, it's, you know, it's amazing. And it's amazing how much people are kind of rediscovering reading again. And I absolutely love that. And, you know, people have had time to read your book. Hopefully they'll have time to read mine too. And yeah, it's very exciting.
Yes, super exciting. Tell us just a little bit about, in your own words, what The Woman from Wallis is Woman Before Wallis is all about.
So The Woman Before Wallis tells the story of a historical person. It's a true story. Her name was Thelma Furness, and she was mistress to the Prince of Wales right before he met Wallis Simpson in 1934 and abdicated the throne. So Thelma Furness was Wallis's best friend. And the reason Edward and Wallis got together was because Thelma had to leave him for a period of about 3 months, 6 weeks to 3 months. And she took Wallis out for lunch. She was afraid that Edward was going to be lonely without her. So she takes Wallis out for lunch, says, Edward will be very lonely while I'm gone. Will you look after him for me?
Yeah.
And Wallis Simpson reached her hand across the table, patted Thelma's hand and said, of course I will. Of course I will, darling. And when Thelma returned from her trip, it turned out Wallis had done a bit too good of a job looking at her.
Yes.
And that kicked off the abdication crisis. So half of the book is about Thelma and her relationship with Edward and subsequently Wallis. The other half of the book is about what she was doing in that time that she was away. She had a twin sister named Gloria Vanderbilt, and Gloria Vanderbilt married into the Vanderbilt family. She had a daughter also named Gloria. And when her husband died quite suddenly, a year after their child was born, she got embroiled in what became the biggest custody battle in American history. And it was an absolute sort of probably the first modern trial with, you know, court reporters rappelling down the sides of the building rappelling down the sides of the building to take photos of the courtroom. Mud all over the place.
Because the scandal was so huge and there's so much money at stake.
There's so much money at stake. There's $2.5 million in a trust fund for little Gloria, and that's what the fight was about. But the sort of the nature of the complaint against Gloria Sr. was that she had had an affair with a woman. And in the 1930s, that was, you know, grave sin.
Who was also part of the royal entourage, royal
exactly,
family in some way.
Exactly. She was cousin by marriage to Edward, the Prince of Wales. So it's this whole kind of royals on both sides of the Atlantic,
right,
behaving badly, if you will. You know, the story. And here's this woman, Thelma, who's at the center of these two scandals, and no one had found her story before. And I came across it and was like, I have to buy that. I have to write that book. I have to make that a thing.
Well, you know, we are fascinated by royals, right? Like even in the henna artists, I have these two Maharanis that we talk about. Mm-hmm. In your book, it is, you know, completely with dukes and duchesses and princes and kings. And so what is this fascination we have with royals? Tell us Tell us, what is your take on all of this? Why are we so, like, we hang on every word about what happens with the royal family?
Well, here's my answer. Why has Coronation Street been on been on for 70 some odd years? Why is As the World Turns important? Royals are the original soap opera. We've got dynasties, we've got lines of people, we've got families that we root for, families that, interlope, and it's just, it all makes for such good drama. And I think, you found that with the henna artist as well. It's, it's so interesting to be able to tap into those lineages and tap into that lifestyle. Yes. That is so beyond anything I know, and yes, so interesting because of that.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you talked about in the book, because I am such a huge lover of fashion and jewelry and all of that, you did a beautiful job in the book of describing everything that Thelma is wearing, Gloria is wearing. These people have unlimited funds with which to buy fabulous things. Tell us a little bit about the research that went into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the book was kind of 2 solid years of research and 2 solid years of writing. And for me, so much of hitting, finding a book that I love, a book that's set in a historical period that I can't put down, is being transported into that time. And that's why, for me, it's all tactile. It's the feel of the clothing. It's the smell of the perfume. It's all of the senses that you can bring in and just envelop yourself in. And that's something that, you did so brilliantly in The Henna Artist. It was a book that I never, ever wanted to come out of. And I think that it's, in order to get that research right, it's so important to be able to, have that tactile experience. So for me, museums were big, going and seeing exhibits of clothing, looking at the stitching of fabrics, looking at, the set of jewelry, things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you actually get a chance to look at any of these kinds of things, like the clothing or the jewelry? I know that you got a chance to look at the biplane, I think, that Edward used to ride.
I did, yeah. So when I wrote this book, I wrote part of it as my thesis when I was at St. Andrews doing my master's in creative writing. And as a result of living in the UK, it was amazing to be able to kind of tap into, a little bit of what Thelma's world looked like. I mean, the UK has done such a brilliant job of maintaining their history, whereas, I live in Toronto and I love it here to bits, but, they don't keep historical buildings the same way. They don't, you walk down the street and it doesn't look and feel the way that it would 70 years ago, whereas with the UK it does. And one of the things that I did end up finding in the course of my research was Edward's biplane. That actually was in Gatineau, Quebec, of all places, and it's this little vintage airplane. It's got an enclosed cockpit, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It's like the Rolls Royce of airplanes. It's stunning, and it gave me such a great insight into his character, which I wasn't really expecting to find, because you look at this airplane and it's beautiful. It's modern. It's chrome. It's got a generator set on the wing so that he can listen to news reports, because he wants to be a modern king. And the way to be a modern king is to always be up on, the latest happenings. So while I was there, I was lucky enough to go up in a biplane of a similar vintage. And I had, the headphones on, I had the helmet on. And even with the, feed into the headphones, it was so loud. The airplane itself was so loud that there's no possible way Edward would have ever been able to hear anything coming out of that little generator powered radio that he had on the side of the plane. So that to me was just such an insight into his character, because it was, here he is, he's so interested in the flash, he's so invested in how he looks, that he's really kind of lost sight of the substance of it and the substance of who he should be. Right. So that was, those are things that you don't find just in a history book. So
okay, so you guys, if you're just joining us, we are talking to Bryn Turnbull, who is the author of The Woman Before Wallis. And of course, that was Wallis Simpson we're talking about. But before Wallis, there was a woman who was very important in Prince Edward's life, or David, I guess, as he liked to be called. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about David, because David/Edward, because one of the things we're pointing out is that he cared very much about image, but he wasn't really looking at like how to govern. He was just looking at sort of the image of what a king of England should look like, and should just like in general. So he doesn't really want to be king, and he abdicates once he marries Wallis. But there are lots of signs in the book that you give us that lets us know that he really doesn't want to be king. In his heart of hearts, he doesn't want to be king. He doesn't want the responsibility. Thelma calls him at the end of the book. We realize that she's calling him a weak person. She realizes he's a weak person. And also, I think I felt that really when he starts making fun of his brother Bertie, who has a stammer. Bertie is the one who actually went on to become king after Edward abdicated. And so tell us a little bit about why is Thelma so attracted to this man who really in his deepest core seems to be kind of a weak person.
Yeah, can I tell you a little secret, Alka? That was the hardest part of the book for me to get, because I'd known about Edward, I'd known about his relationship with Wallis, and in all of my research, I just found him so fundamentally unlikable. Knowing what
me too.
Yeah, like knowing what he did, knowing, the allegiances that he held in his life, it was very difficult to look at this man and think, oh, here's someone, here's the romantic lead in the book. And realistically, he isn't the romantic lead. The love story is about the two sisters more than it is about Edward and Thelma or Edward and Wallis.
Right.
But when I started the research for the book, I knew that I wanted it to be about Thelma. I found her story. That was the person that I was gravitating towards. And I knew that if I had to, I knew that this was going to be the major love story. This was going to be the major romance. How do I tap into that? And was she truly in love with him? Because to me, thinking about the conversation that she had with Wallis that kicked off Wallis and Edward's relationship, take care of him for me, I was looking at that, and initially I thought maybe she's saying to her friend, look, I am leaving the barn doors open, and if the horses get out, they get out. Like, I was pretty convinced when I started research that this was going to be the story of a woman who's trying to get rid of a weak man. Yeah. And then when I started doing the research, one of the things that I found, and I talk about it in the author's note in this book, is when Thelma died at, she was in her 80s. I think she was 83. She dropped out of a heart attack in New York City. And when they found her, she had in her purse a keepsake from Edward. And when I found that out, I realized, oh no,
she really was in love with him.
She was really in love with him. So how do I access that love? How do I make him someone, how do I make him someone that my hero, my character, can fall for? And I think that it all goes back to that invective at the very beginning of the book. We learn that sort of Thelma's mantra for her life is marry money and you'll never want for anything.
Same thing for her twin sister too.
Yep, same thing for her twin sister. That's how they were raised, because as women in the 1930s, they had very limited options. So it was marry money and gain a life of security, or don't and gain a life where you're going to be, working for every penny and fighting for whatever space you have in the world.
Right.
So that really is where that comes from. It's that power that Edward exudes. It's that, that privilege that he has. Mm-hmm. And when he's on, he's actually, he can be a fun guy, but I didn't want, he's by no means a hero. And I didn't ever want him to come across as a hero, because at the end of the day, this is about a woman who takes agency over her life, right, and who realizes that the more important thing for her isn't romance or power, it's the enduring love of her sister and of family. So one of the other ways that Thelma in the Woman Before Wallis takes agency over her life is she stands up to the husband she's actually married to at the time she gets involved with Edward, and that is the Duke. And he is playing around on her. And when she finds out, she is so hurt, like she can't understand. He wooed her, he wanted her. And then suddenly, she finds out that he is playing around on her. He's sort of lost interest in her after the baby, after she has her son. And so she kind of
manages to let him know that that's not okay, that if he can play that game, she can play that game too. And she ends up winning in the end because
Yeah.
he actually wants to reconcile with her once he realizes she has gained the power in the relationship. So talk about that a little bit, about how Thelma regains her power, her agency.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the relationship with, she marries into the British aristocracy, which is how she sort of comes across Edward in the first place. So she marries into this royal family, you know, not royal, she marries into this aristocratic family. And, you know, kind of 2 years into their relationship, she's had a baby. You know, things aren't the same as they were with her and her husband. He starts fooling around on her, and she's advised by other women in her, you know, in her social circle that, you know, oh, we don't divorce over here, we just have affairs. And for Thelma, who's an American, that's just not on, particularly an American. She was married before Duke, and her first husband was a philanderer as well. So she's looking at that going, absolutely not. This is a breaking point for me. This is a point that I'm not going to stand for. Mm-hmm. But in the, you know, again, in the context of her time, in her ability to maintain her own sense of agency and her own sense of ownership, she can't just leave, because that's not what you can do in the 1930s as a woman. So she has to find another way to assert herself and to kind of gain that sense of herself back. And she does that by having this affair.
Right.
Which I think, you know, I think that's it's not a position I would ever want to have to be put in, but it's, you know, good honor for, you know, for stepping out and for taking some agency.
Yeah. And what a contrast that is between what's happening in the 1930s in England with Thelma and her husband, the Duke, and what's happening in the henna artists, where you've got women, wealthy women, who know that their husbands are having affairs. They just need to turn a blind eye and everything is fine. It's not as if, but you see, they don't have that added agency of being able to go out and also have an affair, which is something that Thelma does, which, you know, would have been verboten in India and still would be. Tell us a little bit about, after doing all of this research and writing this book, do you feel that had Thelma not gone to the US, that Edward would have stayed with her, that he might have abdicated the throne for Thelma instead?
Well, I mean, you know, it's a really interesting historical question, because what would have happened? You know, there's so many what ifs with Edward's story. You know, he abdicates the throne, and what if he hadn't? What if he'd been on the throne during the Second World War? I absolutely believe that would have been a disaster for the UK and for the Allies. So, you know, that in and of itself is a what if that kind of makes me run a little cold thinking about it. But Thelma and her relationship with Edward is another massive what if. You know, I think it's fair to say that Edward was looking for an out, and Wallis gave him that out. I think Thelma had more respect for the institution of the monarchy than Wallis did, having married into the aristocracy, whereas Wallis was a complete outsider. She didn't have that same deference, and that's one of the things that Edward, I think, really liked about her, was she kind of allowed him to indulge the idea of not being a royal, whereas with Thelma it was all still very, you know, I don't think that she was ever kind of fooling herself on that score. That said, when Edward ascended to the throne, and, you know, his relationship with Wallis Simpson was becoming common knowledge, there was actually a movement in the British government to bring Thelma back. Oh. Because Wallis was seen as too political. Wallis would, you know, Edward would receive, you know, like the British kings and queens receive these, you know, you see them on the crown, these big red boxes of all of the correspondence that they need to respond to and everything that they need to sign. And Edward used to allow Wallis to go through them. And that was horrifying to the government, horrifying to his staff. And it was seen as a major political and constitutional issue. Whereas Thelma never really expressed an interest in governance. She wasn't political. So when the abdication was happening, when the constitutional crisis was occurring, there was a movement in government to bring Thelma back, because the government said, well, you know, he just wants an American woman, so let's see if we can get Thelma to come back in, because yeah, as far as a consort, she's way preferable to this opinionated, outspoken, brash Wallis Simpson. And needless to say, that did not work.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Bryn Turnbull about The Woman Before Wallis. And today is her release day for this book. So we're helping launch this fabulous book. In the back, of course, there are some book club questions and also an interview with you for some questions that people may be interested in knowing about some of your research and your impetus for doing this book. Tell us a little bit about the family that would breed a woman like, or twins like Gloria and Thelma. Tell us a little bit about that mother, because their mother plays a huge role in what happens with the custody case, and in also just what happens with the two of these women and how they're sort of trained to marry wealthy men. What is this all about?
Yeah, so the mother in the book, and this is not a spoiler really to say, because I mention it, I think, in the first 10 pages. Laura Morgan, Thelma and Gloria's mother, she sided with the Vanderbilt family against Gloria in the custody battle that that ensues in the book. So she sided against her own daughter, and she sided against Thelma. And you know, she was a very imperious woman. She was a very, you know, very stern woman. And everything that we know about her really comes from Thelma and Gloria's own autobiography. So understanding that it's a one-sided portrayal of who she was, it's still very difficult to look at a mother and say, how can you turn your back on your daughter so unbelievably harshly and in the public eye, the way that Laura Morgan does. And, you know, so there was a lot of research that had to go into that. And there was a lot of kind of parsing out what her motivations would have been. But ultimately, Laura Morgan was a woman who, she married an American diplomat. She was Chilean, married an American diplomat. And, you know, again, their marriage wasn't great. And as a result of that, you know, they moved all over the world, but they lived quite separately. And Laura always felt that she didn't have enough to live on. She was always worried about money. She was always concerned about where her next meal was coming from. And that to me was why she was so motivated to raise her daughters to, you know, marry into wealth, because in her mind, that's an assurance. In her mind, that's okay, my kids are going to be safe. My kids are going to be fine. And when the court trial occurs, when Gloria Senior's husband dies and she's left with this baby, the baby's money is the only trust fund that they have left to live on, because Gloria's husband, Reginald Vanderbilt, basically drank away his money. He squandered all of it. And when he died, he was in debt, like seriously in debt. So he thought that he was leaving his wife money. He thought he was leaving his daughter money, but it turned out that the only money available was this $2.5 million trust fund that the mother couldn't touch. So here is Gloria, Thelma's sister, in a situation where the only money that she has is income from a trust fund. And she has no skills. She's got no skills in the world, because all she was taught is be pretty and catch someone's eye. And she can no longer really do that. She's got a child in tow. She's got, you know, all of this baggage. And so, you know, Laura Morgan is looking at the situation thinking to herself, well, okay, my daughter's kind of, you know, it's not going to work. She's wasting the money. She's spending it poorly. She's having parties. She's having affairs with women. Leaving her aside, I'm just going to focus on the child. And I'm going to get my hands to be able to control that money. So I think Laura really had you know, her obsession was with money, and the end result of that is you lose everyone.
Well, part of what's going on also, and I'm wondering if you know where this idea came from, is that both Gloria and Thelma, the sisters, they're not actually raising their own children. They are leaving the care and feeding of their children to nurses and governesses and nannies. So so they don't have like direct control all the time over their children. And this is one of the reasons I think why Gloria loses purchase over her own child. Where did this idea come about that the wealthy should not take care of their own children, but they should leave it to the care and feeding of, of their children to somebody else? Where did this notion come from? Because, well, it was also the same with Indian royalty. So,
I was just about to say, yeah, it's the same thing. And I think so much of it is this historical perspective on children. I mean, your job as your job as a royal, your job as a royal wife is not to raise kids, it's to have kids, but then it's to be there for your husband, and it's to support your husband, and it's to be, around your husband. I think for the longest time, and you see this with Queen Victoria, who had, like a litter of children, and she had wanted nothing to do with them at all because it was seen as distasteful. Like there's still, I think in so many ways, there's still that Victorian attitude that permeated royal society, which was, I mean, we have children, but we don't talk about it. And the next day we're wrenched back into the corset and it's absolutely fine. Right?
Wow. Yes.
So I think that's just been a holdover in the aristocracy for so long.
Yeah.
That, children are kind of meant to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, if you read about Southern plantations, right? The kids were raised by, other people at the plantation. They were not raised by the mothers who were, like you said, the next day after child has come out, they are putting in corsets and, trimming down to their 18-inch waist.
Yeah, your job is to be a hostess. It's not to be a mother. My God.
Right.
Distasteful, right?
What do you, okay, so there are so many questions. There's so much juice in this book, The Woman Before Wallis. There is, there's scandal after scandal. There is the wealth that has suddenly disappeared. There are alcoholic husbands. There are affairs. There are these notions of, and then there's the lesbian love affair between Gloria and her partner, who, by the way, does not stand by her at the custody battle at all, and that really breaks Gloria's heart, I think.
Yeah.
But there's so much about Gloria. It's herself that is so sexy. Things that are happening in her life. Did you think about not just talking about Thelma, but just focusing on Gloria for your book? Or is it that she was already too overdone? Because I didn't know anything about her before this book.
I didn't either. I had no idea. I knew, the only thing I knew about Gloria Vanderbilt was Gloria Vanderbilt genes, which was the daughter, right? Like, it's the Gloria Vanderbilt genes, Anderson Cooper's mom, like, that was really all that I knew. And I had no idea that she had a connection to this story. When I found Thelma Furness, it was actually through a movie directed by Madonna. I think it came out in 2011, and it was called W.E. And it was about the relationship between Edward and Wallis Simpson. And they referenced this moment in the movie that starts out my book, which is where Thelma asks Wallis to take care of Edward while she's gone. And that for me was the entry point into this character. And I started thinking, well, that's what an interesting thing to say. Who was she? What was going on? So I fell kind of down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. And when I came out the other side of it, I was going, oh my God, not only was she involved with Edward, but she was involved in this custody battle. And this custody battle was huge. And her sister was Gloria Vanderbilt, and her sister had this incredible life. And it all kind of swirled together. But the linchpin for me was always Thelma. Mm-hmm. And, 1,000 other books could be written on Gloria, absolutely, because there was so much in her life that was interesting. And there's so much in her daughter's life that's interesting. Yeah. But here's this person who just, she started knocking on the inside of my skull and wouldn't leave me alone until I'd written a book about her. So that's really where that came from.
Isn't it funny how characters do that? They just knock at you and they just say, I want to tell my story. I want to tell this story.
Oh my God. I know, you must have had the same thing.
Totally. And then when you've been with them for a while, for years, and you're doing all this research, you miss them when they're gone. You miss them when you're no longer writing about them. It's kind of I can't quite explain it because they're not real. And you and I know our characters are not, you know, they're not here actually with us, but they're in our heads. They occupy some space there that feels very tangible.
I actually remember I used to tell people when I was writing this book that I was involved in a 4-year relationship with a woman who died in the 1980s, because it was like it's that intensity. You've got this person in your head talking to you the whole time.
Yeah.
And you know, I know that I think, you know, with your characters in The Hen Artist with Lakshmi, you're returning to them, aren't you? Like it's so amazing to want to have that, you know, that connection continue.
That connection, yeah. And you know, for me, it was Malik who kept coming back to me.
Yeah.
You know, I want to tell my story. I want to tell my story. So then I ended up writing a sequel that's also going to come out next year. And I wouldn't have done that if that character hadn't been bugging me in my head the whole time. You know, I would have just gone on to another project.
Oh,
so
totally.
Yeah. Somebody else is saying, as a reader, I feel the same way after reading a beautiful book. You know, those characters who will not leave you alone. I think we've all had that experience. I don't think it's possible to become a writer without also having been a reader. Right, Bryn?
Absolutely.
I mean, you and I, we grew up reading. We read so much we could have, you know, eaten books for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I think when you grow up like that, characters start living with you. You know, I still think about characters in books that I've read 15 years ago, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, the best characters stick with you, and you know, you learn from them the way that you learn from your friends and you learn from your family. And I think that our job as writers is to create characters that have, you know, lessons to teach people and have that love to give.
Yeah. If there was one thing that you wish people would take away from The Woman Before Wallis, what would it be? What do you want readers to walk away with?
I think that's a really great question. I think what I want people to walk away from it with is the understanding that, you know, like this is a book about that fundamental bond between sisters. I dedicated it to my sister, with whom I've got, you know, a very close relationship, and it, you know, not every story has to be a love story, and you know, it can be about sister love, it can be about platonic love. It's not always about the romance. And I think you know, and I mean, The Henna Artist is the same way. It's about that bond between sisters.
Those
and how
two
important
sisters.
that is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, the love interest is interesting, but it's not what develops the character of the sisters in your book and the sisters in my book.
Exactly.
Their relationship is developing because of what they're learning about each other. And I think in the Woman Before Wallis, Gloria and Thelma are learning things about each other and sort of learning to forgive things about each other too, because they're not the same person. They're very different from each other.
No, and I mean, you know, they were identical twins. They were raised to be, you know, their mother called them a matching set. They were raised to be the same. And, you know, as you grow, you realize that, you know, you're distinct people. You realize that you've got distinct personalities, and isn't that wonderful? And isn't that something to celebrate? Yes. And yeah, it's, you know, it's really exciting.
Well, is there any last kind of thing that you would like to tell us about either the book or about your research or anything about The Woman Before Wallis?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say thank you for reading it. Thank you so much for, you know, for enjoying the book. Everybody who's on this call, please pick it up. Please read it. I hope that you really enjoy it. This has been an absolute joy to write. This is my first novel, and it's been just incredible to see the outpouring of love for Thelma and Wallis and for this whole world that they're living in. And I'm just so, I so hope that people, you know, people see this story and enjoy it.
And where can people get a copy?
You can get it, you know, you can order it from Barnes & Noble, Indigo, if you're in Canada, Kepler's Books, Type Books in Toronto. We've got some amazing stores that are, you know, that are amazing stores that are carrying this book. And please, you know, pick it up. Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. So we've been talking to Bryn Turnbull, who wrote a fabulous book called Woman Before Wallis. Today is her launch day. And hold up your book, hold up your book. You know, at HarperCollins, one of the first things they taught me is hold up your book. Whenever you're talking about your book, hold up your book.
Hold it up. I know, I need to get a big poster board like you've got. That's very
Yeah,
smart.
yeah, they sent it to me. So, yeah, I was so surprised to get this huge poster, and I thought, hey, why not? This will become my background now for everything I do. But thank you so much for talking to us today. And somebody is saying, I'm so glad strong women like you guys are here writing these stories. Thank you. And you know what, you guys, you readers are fabulous readers and fabulous women also. Thank you for reading the things that we write. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, right, Bryn?
Exactly. Like, I'm so grateful to all of the readers who are out there. Kepler's books and Type Books, I'm thankful to you guys for hosting this. And Alka, I'm so thankful to you. Thank you so much for reading this book. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, absolutely. All right, you guys. So pick up the book today, and you can get it. Yeah, thank you. You can get it in audiobook, in ebook, and in paperback and hardcover form. So yeah, I think you and I are very lucky. We have a great publisher, Mira Books, and they do a phenomenal job with their authors and their books and the covers. I think they do a beautiful job with their covers.
My God, I know we have got spectacular covers. They've been an amazing publisher to work with. So
yes.
From start to finish.
Yes. Yay, Harlequin Art Department. Woohoo. Okay. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will chit chat with you later. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.